Welcome, brothers, to another Warhammer reaction. Today we are watching the War for Armageddon Steel Legion from my boy archwarhammer. We have checked out a lot of his content, man, and he is a great YouTuber when it comes to Warhammer. And this was a request, the War for Armageddon. I believe this is the war that Grimaldus fought, maybe not originally, because obviously there was a war there first where Yarrick became really famous, of course, or killing one of the orc bosses, and then they came back, and that's where Hell's Reach takes place in Armageddon, I believe. So yeah, this should be interesting, man. Be sure to leave that like and subscribe if you are new to this channel for more reactions and be sure to suggest any videos you would like me to watch. Well, let's go.
Greetings and salutations, friends, and welcome finally to the first episode of what is going to be a relatively lengthy series on the various wars fought over the planet Armageddon. This first episode is going to be detailing the forces of the Imperium, and more specifically, the Steel Legion, which makes up the planet of Armageddon's primary Imperial Guard and PDF regiments. The planet of Armageddon is heavily industrialized, and has been for millennia. This inevitably leads to severe damage to the environment, and in the case of Armageddon, this damage has rendered large parts of the planet virtually uninhabitable. Areas like the Deadlands and the Fire Wastes are both extremely expansive and hostile. Very little, if anything, grows in these areas, and what does grow / live there can safely be assumed to be extremely tough and probably equally
Feral orcs. God damn it, orc.
hostile to soft, squishy, protein-filled humans. The equatorial jungle is scarcely any less deadly, although for entirely different reasons, and equally impassable.
Hell's Reach! Hell's Reach!
Making up a natural border of sorts between Armageddon Prime and Secundus. The jungle belt consists of miles upon miles of hostile jungle, filled with angry and hungry animals, along with the natural dangers that a jungle presents. And other places, like for example the Phoenix Islands, are downright lethal to humans. Though in the case of the Phoenix Islands, it is no quirk of nature that makes this area so deadly. Rather, it is man in all his ingenuity that has turned this place into a toxic wasteland, filled with poisonous and in many cases also corrosive gases, along with pits and slag dumps of extremely toxic materials. And it is only going to get worse, because the island's constant stream of raw materials means that it is still in operation to this very day, despite the fact that any unprotected human that ventures outside of the armored bunkers that house the production facilities will be dead within minutes, if he's lucky. As you can imagine, defending this hellhole presents the locals with quite a few problems. Any deployment of troops is going to need massive logistical elements to keep the soldiers fed and hydrated, and in many cases, the troops will also be entirely reliant on closed and hardened vehicles simply to stay alive, and at the very least, they are going to be reliant upon constant supplies of filtration devices for their gas masks, and in many cases also various toxic-resistant materials. Luckily, the very reason for these hostile environments, namely heavy industrialization, also presents the answer to this problem. Armageddon is one of relatively few planets capable of outfitting entirely mechanized regiments of Imperial Guardsmen. The troops all ride in armored fighting vehicles, and the logistics is handled by both half-tracks and full-track transport vehicles, both capable of transporting and, perhaps more importantly, storing vast quantities of supplies in environments that would normally contaminate food and water to the point of lethality. There is also, of course, the simple fact that a mechanized regiment has a considerably wider range of movement than one on foot, especially in terrain that is usually hostile and outright deadly to combatants. This not only lets the regiment cross areas of, as said, extremely hostile terrain quickly and in relative safety, but also allows the regiment in question to adopt a strategy of elastic defense, where the main strength of the regiment is located either outside the hostile zone or in built-up base camps. The defensive line, as such, is then held by scattered groups of mechanized scouts that will detect, engage, and delay any enemy forces until the main force of the regiment can be mobilized to smash apart the enemy's spearhead with a concerted counterattack. And of course, on top of the obvious defensive benefits, a fully mechanized regiment has considerable offensive advantages. The most obvious one is, of course, the simple fact that every infantry squad will be able to rely upon the supporting fire and mobile cover provided by their transports or infantry fighting vehicle, abbreviated to IFV from here on out. But far more importantly than the simple addition of some extra cover and a heavy weapon is the IFV's engine. A mechanized regiment will be able to concentrate its forces far more effectively and smoothly, and by doing so it can avoid the enemy's strongest units, and focus all of its considerable offensive power on one small portion of the enemy's front line. Preferably, the regiment will want to simply overrun any force directly in front of it, relying on good old-fashioned shock and awe to scatter the enemy. A small portion of the offensive force will be left behind in order to secure an opening in the front just in case the regiment needs to beat a hasty retreat, and the remaining forces then continue deeper into the enemy's rear lines. The hope, of course, is to destroy or capture enemy logistical units, supplies, and/or command personnel, while spreading general chaos and disorder in the enemy's lines. But that, of course, is merely the immediate tactical goal. The strategic goal of such a breakthrough is to force the enemy to retreat the forces to either side of the penetration due to the possibility of these units getting attacked in the flank and eventually rolled up, a situation with potentially devastating consequences as it could potentially lead to the entire enemy's front line being outflanked, surrounded, and eventually simply destroyed in an encircling maneuver by vastly superior mobile forces. And now that we've had a bit of a generalized look, let's talk organization. A typical Steel Legion regiment is made up of 12 companies.
Sorry if I'm not talking a lot, just kind of taking this one in at the moment. Taking this one in. Gotta just try and listen, so yeah.
For example, a regiment might look something like this, the 42nd Steel Legion Regiment. The company headquarters is mounted in its own command chimera, along with any attached personnel and of course the commander himself. Then you have 6 companies of mechanized infantry, 3 companies of armored vehicles, 1 company of mechanized artillery, 1 company of mechanized AA and AAA, and finally the 12th company of super heavy tanks. As you might notice, this is not a doctrinal regiment. This is something rather unique to the Steel Legion. As most of you probably know, and I will be touching upon a little bit later, most Imperial Guard regiments are not allowed to be mixed forces, but the Steel Legion has and can get...
We learn about that because they don't get along. They don't get along. We heard in the Krieg video that Krieg soldiers can't really mix with most of the other people because they don't accept the leaders or they think they're stupid. Similarly, Krieg leaders cannot lead other troops because the same thing. So yeah, you have to be kind of with your same people, your same troops.
Get away with that to a certain degree. Again, I'll get into that a little bit more later. And as for what a doctrinal company might look like, in this case we have a support/artillery company with 6 regiments of self-propelled anti-air and 5 self-propelled artillery regiments, again with 1 company HQ. But sometimes the regiments will be specialized with a particular goal in mind. For example, the Steel Legion could be organized into what is generally called a organic support regiment. This means the regiment is primarily made up of support vehicles. For example, mobile AA and AAA, light mobile artillery like storm shard mortars, or perhaps mechanized scouts mounted in salamanders or sentinels. The idea of having such a regiment is essentially to attach the various companies or platoons to other units to help them achieve specific goals. For example, let us say that a separate regiment is attacking a heavily entrenched front line. It would get a light artillery battalion attached to it, equipped with storm shard mortars that can suppress the enemy with a constant belt-fed stream of airburst rounds. Naturally, the regiments can also be more directly specialized. For example, a mobile artillery regiment equipped entirely with heavy ordnance like basilisks. Or perhaps an armored fist regiment, primarily consisting of IFV-mounted elite infantry. Or perhaps even a super heavy tank regiment, one of the most devastating formations in the Imperial Guard's arsenal. However, if we're talking about a regular Steel Legion regiment, it is usually going to be a doctrinal regiment consisting of only one single branch. For example, it might be all mechanized infantry with only a little tiny bit of armored support, or an all-armored regiment with a little bit of artillery support. In most cases, no more than a single company, and generally speaking something relatively light. For example, Lehman Russes are usually not paired with basilisks, but they might be supported by some storm shard mortars. But as shown in the original example regiment, this does not necessarily always hold true for the Steel Legion. You see, the Steel Legion make use of a bit of a loophole. They claim that their regiments are not combined arms forces. Rather, they are simply mechanized regiments, with mechanized artillery, mechanized anti-air, mechanized tanks, obviously, and mechanized infantry. Therefore, it is not combined arms, but simply mechanized. Now, this explanation would normally not hold much water, but the Steel Legion has garnered themselves quite a reputation for steadfastness and loyalty. Additionally, these regiments have proven themselves to be extremely effective. As such, the Adeptus Administratum often chooses to look the other way, as long as the Steel Legion doesn't push their luck too far. As long as the majority of their regiments are still doctrinal formations, then the Adeptus Administratum will simply look the other way. And for those of you that may not know, I'll quickly explain why combined arms regiments are not accepted under regular Imperial doctrine. The idea is that if you have a combined arms regiment, it will naturally be far more powerful than one focused around a very singular branch of the military. Obviously, these combined arm regiments would be more powerful than the sum of their parts, so to say. And this is precisely why they are not allowed. The idea is that if a combined arms regiment were to defect to chaos, it could prove quite the headache.
That makes sense. So if one of them go into chaos, the rest of them won't be able to stop them. That makes sense, and there'll be a complete and very strong unit.
However, if the regiment would only have access to a single branch of the army, for example, all tanks, all infantry, or all artillery, such a singular formation would be easier to defeat by simply deploying the natural counter. For example, if it is an all-infantry regiment, you simply pound the shit out of it with artillery, as it will not have the mobility to catch up. If it is an all-tank regiment, you can encircle it with infantry and anti-tank weapons, forcing them to attack fortified positions without infantry support. And if it is an all-artillery regiment, you simply just overrun it with tanks or light armored vehicles. And ideally, the dream scenario for an Imperial commander that is so unfortunate as to deal with a rebellious regiment is simply to utilize a smaller force, but a combined arms force. The idea, once again, is that elements from 3 other regiments could overcome the rebellious regiments with far less troops than the regiment actually has available, which means that if all 3 of the regiments were to be thrown at the rebellious regiments at once, they would have far more than a 3-to-1 advantage, since they would be able to utilize combined arms tactics. It does naturally, in some circumstances, weaken the Imperial Guard to utilize this particular system, but it also safeguards against potential corruption, which in the 41st millennium is definitely a very, very real threat. Moving on to the specifics of the companies. An infantry company is generally made up of one command section, containing the company's officers plus staff, including a master Vox operator that uses the primary Vox system to keep in contact with the various platoons and companies. By the way, Vox essentially means radio, for those of you who are not aware. Additionally, the command section contains any attached special personnel, like for example a commissar or ecclesiarchy representatives.
Commissar.
Furthermore, a company will usually have a single heavy weapons platoon, consisting of upwards of 10 heavy weapons and their crews. and the main meat of the company is made up of 3 infantry platoons consisting of 50 men each and 5 heavy weapons team. All this, plus the armoured transport themselves, give a Steel Legion company a grotesque amount of firepower, and considerably more than the standard infantry company. In addition to this, an Armageddon Steel Legion company also boasts an impressive amount of heavy weaponry. In general, the Armageddon Steel Legion favours the rocket launcher due to its flexibility. It can engage large groups of infantry with fragmentation grenades, blast open tanks with crack grenades, and it is not uncommon for the best rocket crews in the companies to be given a few and precious heat-seeking anti-aircraft rounds. That's of course not to say...
Be careful, man, with those heat seekers, mate. Lord, so the Steel Legion is a special force. Obviously, not everybody gets all the tanks, the artillery, and troops. So that's very special for them. But they are fighting in extreme conditions and against orcs who are probably outnumbering them, so...
Saying that the regiments do not use heavy bolters, autocannons, and mortars, etc., but they seem to prefer the rocket launcher. And of course, a degree of specialization is also quite common within the Armageddon Steel Legion. For example, one company's heavy support attachment might be made up entirely of mortars or entirely of heavy bolters to provide indirect or direct fire support to the rest of the regiment. And finally, as for the heavy weapons attached to the infantry squads, this is either made up of a single heavy weapons team, or it is made up of a specialized weapon unit. In many cases, for example, the Armageddon Steel Legion will bring dedicated flamer squads, or in some rare cases plasma units, to oppose particular threats. But by far, the most popular single-man portable heavy weapon in the Armageddon Steel Legion is the grenade launcher. Again, prized for its flexibility, being able to engage enemy infantry in cover with fragmentation rounds, or potentially knock out light enemy armor with crack rounds. Some of the elite armoured fist regiments are also equipped with specialized flash grenades, which can be fired from these specialized grenade launchers, and are invaluable for these units' abilities to take heavily entrenched positions and to storm cover. In the case of specialized companies, like for example tanks and or artillery, they are divided into one command vehicle equipped with a high-powered Vox system and 3 squadrons of 3 vehicles each. This organization is also usually used for support units like anti-air or light artillery, often with the addition of 1 vehicle per squadron, making for 4 units of, for example, Hydra flak batteries. If the regiment is lucky enough to have one, then super heavy tank companies will have 1 command tank and 2 wingmates, for a total of 3 super heavy tanks. Additionally, and this is relatively rare, every company can be founded with 2 support units. For example, demolition experts or scout formations. Usually though, these support formations will be provided by full-on support regiments, as again the Imperium gets really nervous if any one regiment has too many tools at its immediate disposal.
Just in case, bro.
Lastly, let's have a look at the standard equipment of the Steel Legion Guardsmen. Like innumerable other fighting men across the galaxy, the Steel Legionnaire is primarily armed with the M36 lasgun. This is by far the most common lasgun in Imperial service and is considered the standard for lasguns produced across the galaxy, and the Imperial Steel Legion variant has few if any significant mechanical alterations. However, some minor modifications to the weapon has been done to make it a little bit more accommodating to mechanized infantry. The rifle itself has been shortened considerably from the standard version, and it is also usually fitted with a collapsible stock. This is all to ensure that the weapon takes up the minimal amount of space possible inside the not exactly roomy interior.
It's like the AK-74 and COD. Like you got the AK-47, which has got the stock on the back, and then you have the AK-74 in Black Ops, which is basically the same gun without the stock on the back. It's just nice. Like the lasgun is so versatile, man. Like even though it might not be the most powerful, like you can have it in so many different ways, and it's been covered a little bit on how versatile it is, and we'll probably watch some videos in the future about the lasgun, but yeah.
Of a Chimera IFV. As standard, each Guardsman is issued with 4 fully charged power packs that are expected to last him for pretty much the entire campaign. As there has been no significant mechanical alterations to the M36, it can safely be assumed that it's got around about 60 shots depending on the weapon's settings. Now, the ammunition load is somewhat limited, but of course, any infantryman worth his salt is going to cram as many of those little suckers into every last nook, cranny, and crevice of his uniform, in addition to cramming yet more power packs into the Chimera itself. It is a well-established rule that an infantryman that runs out of ammo is a dead infantryman.
Pretty much.
And something else that is likely to result in dead soldiers is a lack of...
Unless you are some kind of bayonet warrior, you can just like fucking slay orcs with a knife. But I doubt you can, but you know, maybe you can.
Body armor. The Steel Legion is equipped with the basic yet undeniably effective flak armor. It provides adequate protection against low-energy projectiles and stabbing weapons, though it is unlikely to stop anything heavier than a rifle bullet or a las blast. Granted, the flak vest does not necessarily need to stop a projectile, nor is it necessarily designed to do so, but at the very least it should make the resulting wound survivable. And despite the relatively low level of protection offered by the armor, it is quite light, relatively small, and fairly easy to produce. Then, like with pretty much every single other regiment, the Steel Legion is equipped with a knife/bayonet. The Steel Legion knife is, however, a little bit special. It is a mono knife, exceptionally sharp and extremely durable. This knife is an indisposable tool to a soldier and a weapon of last resort. Some soldiers, of course, prefer to use their trusty M39 entrenching tool instead. There is an undeniable charm to using a heavy, semi-blunt object to bash the brains of bad guys. Oh, and I guess you could potentially also dig with it as well. And then,
having a bayonet, imagine having no ammo, having just a bayonet and knife would be so disheartening if you're fighting like orcs or Tyranids or something, because you don't want to get close to Tyranids, let's be honest. How are you going to kill Tyranids with a fucking knife, dude? Like, that's so mad. And orcs obviously are stronger and have probably stronger skin and are harder to get in. So if you have a bayonet and you're just trying to, or you're just using the knife and you're just trying to, I'm not too sure what you got to do to the orcs, but you know.
Infantryman's favorites, the grenades. The Steel Legion's reliance on shock and awe tactics necessitates that they be able to quickly overcome defensive positions. And there are very few things indeed that clear out a foxhole faster than a frag grenade. The Steel Legion infantryman carries 4 fragmentation grenades and 4 specialized grenades. Usually...
You know what's funny about frag grenades in real life is they're pretty bad. Like, they're not very effective weapons. Obviously, if people are hiding in a trench, then maybe. But in today's warfare, not too effective, because their blast radius isn't really that big. And obviously they fire shrapnel. Unless you're very close to a frag grenade, you need to be pretty close. So if you're pretty close to a frag grenade, it will probably damage you, but they most likely won't kill you. Frag grenades, unless you like dive on it, like Captain America, where he dives on the false frag grenade. You know, maybe you probably won't die unless you get hit in vital areas and you bleed out. But yeah, but you know, I found out a funny fact. It might have been Mythbusters, you know. If you dive into the water, like if there's water and the frag grenade's in the water, you need to stay out of the water because the effect is amplified. You're more likely to die with a frag in water than out.
2 smoke grenades and 2 photon flash grenades. These could also be exchanged for example, crack grenades, more smoke, or more photons.
Crack grenades.
The smoke, obviously, is used to provide concealment for infantry and vehicles, while the photon flash, as the name suggests, is a flashbang grenade that helps the Steel Legionnaires clear rooms and bunkers by momentarily blinding and deafening the defenders. But on a planet like Armageddon, a soldier needs more than just weapons and armor. He needs basic protection from the environment. The Armageddon Steel Legion is equipped with a specially treated trench coat that is designed to withstand corrosive toxins even during prolonged exposure.
Like the guys.
Additionally, their gloves, boots, and trousers
It's just like the guys on Krieg. Then they have the same type of armor. Then
are treated in the same way. The uniform is now capable of withstanding almost everything Armageddon can throw at it. But while the uniform might be just fine with this, there is still a fleshy little human inside to consider, and so as to prevent said fleshy human from drowning in his own blood as he coughs up his lungs, the Steel Legion trooper is also issued with an Armageddon patterned rebreather mask. This particular pattern is an exceptionally good rebreather. Most such masks are made to be simple gas filters, designed to keep someone alive and relatively undamaged for a limited amount of time. The Armageddon pattern is designed as a fully sealed gas mask that comes with a 2-hour air tank, and the rebreather can even be used underwater. And it will protect the wearer against pretty much anything short of a Nurgle plague. Lastly, the soldier is handed a steel helmet that offers adequate protection against shell fragments, but it is unlikely to prevent a bullet from burrowing into the Steel Legionnaire's squishy brains. And finally, the Guardsman is equipped with 4 empty sandbags, a basic toolkit, specialized poor weather gear, which have been hardened to the environment in Armageddon, mess kit, a canteen, a lamp pack, a grooming kit, a set of dog tags, 2 weeks of rations, and of course, most importantly of all, a copy of the Imperial Infantryman's Uplifting Primer. Note, the Imperial Infantryman's Uplifting Primer must under no circumstances be used as toilet paper. And finally, the proud...
Oh my god, use as toilet paper. You know what I can't get over? Why did they get 4 sandbags?
proud Imperial pack mule is handed a rucksack.
Oh.
Note that the basic Steel Legion soldier is not issued with a medikit. The Steel Legion has specialized medics that ride in medically outfitted Chimera APCs. As long as the wound is not immediately fatal, the average Steel Legion Guardsman has a better chance than most of not dying a slow, drawn-out death. Or at the very least he would be, if it were not for the fact that Armageddon's environment can often be quite hostile in and of itself, and having a nice big hole in your chemically treated tunic might in many cases be more lethal than the bullet that opened said hole.
Correct.
And so we are finally properly begun. It's been a while since I originally started planning this series. This has been the first episode in the Armageddon series. Next up we will be looking at the greenskin invaders, and then we'll be getting to the battles proper. And for those of you who have watched all the way up until this point, an extra little reward, and there might also be one in the Orc video. There is a certain commissar on the planet of Armageddon that has garnered himself a fair bit of fame and prestige, even after he got, well, technically run over by his own Baneblade at one point. If you can write the correct name of the commissar down in the comment sections, you might be one of the lucky winners of Armageddon 40k, a hex-based, turn-based strategy game set in the war for Armageddon, which does a pretty goddamn good job of telling the story. I will be picking the winners the coming Monday, and I will be doing so by answering the comment itself, since YouTube's direct message is occasionally a little bit wonky, so do make sure to check back on Monday.
Yeah, well, we're probably way too late to even be involved in that. It's unfortunate. It's unfortunate. Because this video is actually 2 years old. Actually, it's longer. It's more than 2 years old. So, yeah. We won't be winning any games. But we know it's Jarek. But anyway, thank you for watching this video, man. Be sure to leave a like and subscribe for more Warhammer content and more content in general. And I will see you all next time.